This week we hit a major milestone as it has been 20 years since the first X-Men movie was released, so I decided to go back and rank all 12 movies from this franchise. So let's go. Welcome to Social Screen Talk. My name is Luke Lapointe. I recently started this channel because I love movies. They are a big part of my life, and I want to talk about them with people who care about them as much as I do. With that, remember to hit that like and subscribe button down below, and most importantly, I want to hear you in the comments section. What is your ranking for the X-Men franchise? What movies did you love? What movies did you hate? Where do you agree and disagree with me on my ranking? Because we all have opinions that differ, and I want to hear what you have to say. And with that, let's dive into this ranking. At number 12, I have X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now, this is a movie that just makes so many mistakes and has so few redeemable qualities. The one redeemable quality is probably Hugh Jackman. Even in the worst X-Men movies with the worst and laziest scripts, he always puts together a pretty good performance on screen. But other than that, this movie sucked. It could not decide what it wanted to be, and every scene had a different vibe to it. One second it's really dark, and the next they try to go for the worst jokes possible. And even though X2 did this well with the comedy and the darkness, this movie certainly didn't. It zooms through almost 150 years of Wolverine's life that seemed way more interesting than what we got in this movie. We got a love story that no one asked for or cared about. The plot contradicts itself on every occasion, and the animation on Wolverine's claws are utterly laughable. They add a lot of mutants into the mix that we do not spend enough time with to have any interest in. And then there's what they did to Deadpool. They took Ryan Reynolds, who we would later learn was born to play this role, and a character that literally has the nickname, the Merc with the Mouth, and they sew his mouth shut. I do not know who made that decision, but I'm happy that Deadpool and Deadpool 2 rectified that problem. But still, this is a terrible movie that I'm pretty sure has the overall consensus that it sits at last in this franchise. At number 11, I have X-Men Apocalypse. Now, this is a very disappointing movie. First off, they get Oscar Isaac to play Apocalypse, which is a pretty good casting, to play one of the most powerful villains in the X-Men universe, and then they used him awfully. They take this all-powerful villain and have him gain all this knowledge and power by having him touch a TV and say, "learning." And then he does almost nothing until the final battle. He was always such a danger and menacing in the comics, and he just was not that in this movie. And then they got Jean Grey into this movie, which was a pretty good addition. Sophie Turner wasn't terrible, but then they ruined the continuity and the timeline by having her tap into the Phoenix Force during the final battle of this movie. And then they make the mistake which they have made since the end of Days of Future Past, and they focus a lot of the plot on Mystique, which is a terrible choice because no one wants that anymore. What happened to the Mutant and Proud stuff too? Because she spent so much time as Jennifer Lawrence and not as Mystique because she got too big to sit in the makeup chair as well. And the one good part of this movie that did have some heart was our little subplot with Magneto and his family, which was very well done. But other than that, this movie had some excellent concepts that were so poorly executed by Bryan Singer of all people. At number 10, we have Dark Phoenix. Now, this was a movie I had so much hope for when I saw the trailers. The Phoenix Saga is one of the most important parts of the comics and always needed a full movie to delve into. And that's something The Last Stand did not do, but we'll get into that. But Dark Phoenix took something with so much promise and ruined it. First off, James McAvoy plays so against himself as Charles Xavier. He's so airheaded and does things you never thought Charles would do, especially with some of the things he does with Jean's mind out of the blue. And even though she was saved by the Phoenix Force, Jean's mental and emotional turn still felt really random. And then Jessica Chastain's alien character was so bland and boring. She did not bring any intrigue into the movie, which was pretty bland overall. In addition, the timeline makes no sense, as in 10 years, Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy are supposed to look like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. Now, Sophie Turner did an alright job as Jean and expressing some of the emotional terror and stress she was experiencing. And some of the action in that train scene in the third act was pretty good, even though they had to change it up on the fly. Other than that, it was a disappointing flop to end this X-Men franchise. At number 9, I have X-Men The Last Stand. Now, this is a movie that had about 3 movies worth of material. There was the Mutant Cure plot, the Brotherhood of Mutants, and then the Phoenix plotline. The first 2 had some interesting pieces, especially with some of the interactions between Charles and Eric. And I kind of like the Mutant Cure plotline. I wish they focused on that one and then did a Phoenix movie to finish off as a quadrilogy. But then they decided to do it all and make the Phoenix story like a B-plot. And I would have loved a full Phoenix movie with Famke Janssen rather than Sophie Turner. Not to mention the criminal way they killed Cyclops and Charles. There was some good action in this movie and some very emotional scenes, especially at the end with Logan and Jean, but this movie falls so short of what it could have been. At number 8, I have the Wolverine. Now from here on out, the rest of the movies on this list are good to great movies. And in terms of the Wolverine, this was a pretty good job for James Mangold's first go at a Wolverine solo movie. It was certainly a huge step up from X-Men Origins Wolverine, and taking away from some of Logan's immortality was a smart choice, as I think it added a lot more tension into the movie and the action scenes. Some of the scenery in Japan was absolutely beautiful. In the beginning, it was really focusing on Logan as a person and a character more than just a superhero. Some of the action was really cool, and there were some things that were said that really paid off later in Logan. And as always, Jackman put a really strong performance into this movie. However, the plot did shift towards the end of the movie, and it went from something that was very character-driven to a plot that was a little more convoluted and more of a typical CGI-filled superhero movie. But still, it was a good movie that allowed James Mangold to make Logan, which we all love. At number 7, I have Deadpool 2. Now, I remember when this came out in 2018, I saw this and Infinity War in a 2-week span. Suffice it to say, those were 2 movies with 2 very different tones. And this movie was still very funny. However, it did try to go for every joke more than the first Deadpool did. Some of it didn't land as much and felt a little tiresome on like 1 or 2 occasions, but it was still really funny. Ryan Reynolds still kills it as Deadpool, and I can't imagine anyone else doing that role now. And he has done so well with all the meta humor and the well-timed fourth wall breaks. And in addition, everything they did in the first movie, there was so much heart added in this movie. Seeing Wade feel some sort of parental connection and responsibility for Russell was so nice after what happened to Vanessa in the beginning of the movie. And even though his death was a little drawn out, when he finally gets to see Vanessa and hug her again with Take On Me playing in the background, that was so beautiful, and I saw some tears being shed in the theater. In addition, the cast had some excellent additions with Josh Brolin as Cable and Zazie Beetz as Domino. So even though some of the humor is forced and there was a lot of subplots, this was still a very worthy sequel to the original Deadpool. At number 6, I have X-Men. Now, this was such a monumental film for Marvel and the superhero genre in general. The original X-Men movie allowed the superhero genre to take more of a serious tone. And not to mention, this movie gets extra points for introducing us to so many iconic characters, whether it's Jackman's Wolverine, Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier, Ian McKellen's Magneto, and so many others. There's too many to list. And the plot didn't have to get too convoluted, as the difference between good and evil was very clearly defined, but they got very good and complex because of the characters who were so deep and philosophical, and with performances that made you think. Stuart McKellen shined in this movie. The way they used Jackman in addition in this fish out of water scenario was very well done, as we were able to learn about this mutant world in such a short time. Some of the aspects of this film have not aged as well though, specifically some of the tacky uniforms, limited action, and the early 2000s special effects However, it was such an iconic movie that meant so much to the superhero genre. At number 5, I have X-Men First Class. Now, at this point in the X-Men franchise, there was not much hope instilled into any upcoming films. However, this movie came out and I believe surprised a lot of people. Of all their options, a prequel and X-Men origin story was the best choice. Wrapping the story around the Cold War and the 60s was also an extremely smart move, and revolving the story a lot around Eric and what he was going through was absolute brilliance, as it allowed us to truly dive into the thoughts and motivations of one of our most powerful and influential villains. And of all the things that Matthew Vaughn did right, the thing he did perfectly was the casting. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender fit perfectly in their roles and have so much great on-screen chemistry, the same way that Stewart and McKellen do. Sebastian Shaw was an alright villain and was surrounded by some other alright supporting villains, whether it's Emma Frost or Azazel. And there was a lot of stuff going on in this movie over a short span, but that all didn't take a whole lot away from the plot. However, this movie did reinvigorate a dying X-Men franchise and set up the possibility of a pretty good 20th century timeline. At number 4, we have Deadpool. And before we get into Deadpool, let me say thank God for this movie. This movie was able to eliminate the abomination of a character we got in X-Men Origins Wolverine. And thank God Ryan Reynolds persevered and pushed to get this movie made. First off, it was a very nice and fresh take to get an R-rated superhero movie that also serves as a comedy. Everyone a part of Deadpool had so much fun making this and made a superhero movie while also making fun of the superhero genre. Ryan Reynolds is so witty with his humor, fourth wall breaks, and meta approach to this superhero, as it is in the comics. And whether it's talking about the wonky X-Men timeline, or the lack of relevant superheroes, or superhero landings, he did a great job. And I remember when I saw this in the theaters, I could not stop laughing. Some of the action was also really amazing and very fun. Francis wasn't much of a villain, but I don't think that mattered because this movie was really all about Wade. And this was just such a fresh superhero movie that I can rewatch time and time again. At number 3, I have X2. Now, this is what people talk about when they mention sequels done right that improve on all the aspects of the original movie. First off, it did a great job on expanding this mutant world that was established in the first X-Men movie. It introduced us to Colonel Stryker, who was such a great and convincing villain played by Brian Cox, who brought extra motivation and rage upon Logan. And that scene in the X-Mansion with the wall of ice between Logan and Stryker was so well done and felt personal. It gives me chills every time. As always, Hugh Jackman gave us another great, if not one of his best performances. Anna Paquin greatly improved upon her performance from the first movie. Her side story with Bobby, as well as some of the deep emotional moments from Bobby, were so well done. And as always, Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen are great together on screen. And it was great to see them come together more as allies than as opposition. X2 also does a terrific job balancing a darker tone with a comedic tone. And of course, some of the action is incredible. Whether it's the invasion of the X-Mansion or that incredibly shot Nightcrawler scene in the White House, it was so well done. And so this is a movie where Bryan Singer did everything right and is one of those occasions where the sequel is better than the original. At number 2, I have X-Men Days of Future Past. Now, following the success of First Class, Bryan Singer coming back to the franchise meant great things to come. And this movie was meant to be epic, and it absolutely was. Setting up a scenario where we could bring both our older cast and our younger X-Men cast was amazing, and while we get scenes in both the present day and the 1970s, setting the majority of the movie with us following Wolverine in the 1970s was a very smart choice. This is also at the time where basing a lot of the plot on Mystique was good and not overdone. This could have been a wild movie with the time traveling and all that stuff. But Bryan Singer is able to keep it all in check and on point and really allow the audience to understand the plight of the mutants. In addition, it was great to see the friendship of Eric and Charles in multiple time periods, as well as that amazing scene between our Stewart and McAvoy Xaviers. Some of the scenes were so well shot, especially that Quicksilver scene. The action is great, especially the action that happens in the present day. And even though the timeline got a little weird at the end, I was so happy with the ending that we got. Being able to see Jean, and in the road cut, being able to see Rogue and Bobby. And the road cut actually does help straighten out some of the things that seemed a little wonky in the theatrical cut. So if you haven't checked it out, I would. But anyways, this is a great movie that set out to be epic and did the job it was supposed to do. But at number 1, we have Logan. Now, this was a movie I greatly regret not seeing in the theaters. The first time I saw this was on an airplane a couple months after it was released, and I remember crying on the airplane after I finished it for about 10 minutes. This wasn't just a great superhero movie, it was a great movie in general. It scaled everything down so much from a normal X-Men movie and made everything feel so emotional and real. Without a doubt, Hugh Jackman's last go at the hero he'd been playing for almost 2 decades was his best. He expresses this truly broken man whose years are catching up to him. Patrick Stewart also does an incredible job at encapsulating how time catches up to everyone. And this movie was gritty, gory, brutal. The action was amazing. The plot was deep, and it had so much heart, way more heart than any of the X-Men movies combined, in my opinion. And it also feels like the least like an X-Men movie, and that's why I think it did so well. Not to mention Logan's death. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it, but Logan's death was done so well and so emotionally with Laura and all that, and I cry every time. And this was a perfect swan song for Hugh Jackman and Wolverine, and that is why it sits at number 1. And that's it. That's all I've got for you today. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I want to hear you in that comment section. What's your ranking? Where do you agree and disagree with me? And what X-Men movies do you think I should rewatch to get a better opinion of? Because I wouldn't mind rewatching them. Thank you so much, and keep loving movies as much as I do.